Okay, I have a lot of material, so this is being recorded and I will get started. So welcome to Web3 Wednesdays. This has been the fourth month that I'll be doing this. This is covering the latest insights from November to December. And I'm Clemens Wan. I'm a solution architect and AI evangelist within Consensus. I've been at Consensus for 5 years, and it's been fun doing a little mini pivot into more AI work. So to get started, I, in the past month, have been putting together a 4-hour course just to gauge people's interests. These are the topics that will be covered. It's really about getting started as a innovation lead within your company and how to create some base material for your products and also for your C-suite team to review. And so I was going to package this in a 4-hour course, maybe 15 to 20-minute type of videos to do a 101 plus hands-on exercises. So if there's interest, feel free to ping me. I'm going to finish up the recordings by the end of the month and launch this next month. Great. So the general purpose of this session is to help Web3 companies, but also any companies, maybe DAOs themselves, see the latest trends that I've been experimenting with around AI. So I'll do a quick 15-minute AI insights, just the latest of what's been happening and the trend from kind of the past year in OpenAI as well. Then I'll go through some news of the day. There's also the org process models that change. So kind of a bit of a thought experiment of how AI agents can be implemented into your everyday life. And then finally, I'll do some hands-on for GPTs. So this is from the GPT store that was announced by OpenAI and then quickly, reverted to be launched next year. But people have been building GPTs. There's GPT stores that are kind of popping up in different places or directories. So I'll be exploring some of those. As an intro, I always like to talk about how Consensus is approaching AI. So in terms of internal facing, we completed hackathons. We started off with company-wide policies by looking at legal, looking at security, making sure that people aren't uploading their internal meetings to ChatGPT, for example. We created a decentralized approach of an applied AI channel and worked with different parties to just share the latest news and the relevance to their product stack. And then we had access to Azure as well as AWS. So we worked with Azure on the OpenAI playground, did a bunch of testing for our hackathon, and gave people access to the OpenAI playground there. Then we had a 8-week, or I guess became a 10-week AI takeover sprint. Basically, every week we would send out a themed training and session. We did prompting, image generation, writing, policies. We thought that was really impactful. There were little mini experiments that people could do internally, and I'll share all those in the course as well. And now we have an official AI team under our Octo, which is Office of the CTO, and there's proper processes for reviewing different software that we might use internally for including any guides and tutorials for internal productivity with AI. I think overall it's been a journey, but I think it's been the right path towards accelerating and using these tools earnestly, just kind of dipping our toe into it and then building processes around there. For public facing, a lot of tutorials have been written with the help of ChatGPT. I'm going to talk about the 10-80-10 rule of really coming up with ideas for SEO, but then having AI agents do some of the writing, but then finishing it off with your own edits and making sure that you're testing all the code that's being written, for example. In terms of marketing, there's different code snippets that are being written within Python, but also with Solidity. There's a lot of these little pieces that we're just dipping our toe into. And there are a lot of examples of GPT AI agents where you can create your own chatbot, and I think that's super useful. So we'll continue to do that. And in terms of exploration, you can... Oh, participants can now see my screen? Was I not sharing my screen before? Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay, so the other piece here is exploration. So we thought about what a Snaps GPT would look like. There's kind of the basic version of it where you're just gaining access to the GPT for APIs, but it could be more advanced. For example, it could scan your entire portfolio and you can, generate some type of NFT off of all the NFTs that you have based on your NFTs in your portfolio. Something like that could be super interesting. And I think that one of the exercises that we have is thinking about how to reduce internal meeting times and use summaries properly. So looking at different tools like Otter, which I think we've blocked, or Fireflies, or even within Zoom, they have their own Zoom meeting companion. So how do we look at those properly? If you've missed the earlier sessions, they're all available on this unlisted YouTube playlist. So feel free to watch them. I'll upload these sessions as well. And yeah, looking forward to now diving into the AI insights. So 10 to 15 minutes, let's just cover from beginning to end. First of all, generative AI with LLMs is different because we are talking about a foundational model. AI has been around for quite a long time, and the special purpose AI that people have thought about implementation is around supervised learning, meaning you have a lot of data, and that data can be reviewed for patterns, and then you can label them. So if you have email and you have an output of whether or not it's spam, then you can create some type of methodology and algorithm for figuring out spam. If you have, videos and you like to watch those videos, then based on the algorithm of TikTok or YouTube, there are recommendations based on that type of categorization of video, and they can test different types of algorithms for that. And if you have ads, for example, and you click on them or you don't click on them, then you kind of create this online advertising type of application. What's different about generative AI and kind of prompt-based AI is we effectively created a mechanism for a transformer that understands the semantic English outputs by predicting the next series of words. And so the large language models that we have all across the board use a GPT, which is kind of this generative pre-trained transformer model that allows you to understand English and many other languages. And it does also use supervised learning in some ways, but it's using this to predict the next word. And so the way that I've simplified it is that all of this LLM and foundational model work, and the work that we develop on top of it is really a new linguistic user experience and user interface that's being built. And I think that's why people are so excited, because people are used to speaking to Siri and Google and different types of Google Assistant and other types of things, but this is now understanding more context and having longer term memory of the threads of conversations that you have. And so the predictions that I made from April, I think have come true. So the first is work arbitrage, meaning for service-based companies, for consultants, for freelancers, there is going to be a difference in pricing that you can take advantage of, and individuals in the creator economy and kind of building this material will start to take advantage of using the tools, creating faceless YouTube channels. I think all this is super popular and will continue to grow. And second, the enterprises that have looked at AI and looked at applying AI have really used this for onboarding, used this for leveraging the tools responsibly, used it for building their own little AI interns so that they can do simple tasks. Maybe it relates to creating thumbnails or hero images for marketing, but it starts to kind of grow into other types of activities. There's high data privacy activities that need to be really considered. You want a stateless type of internal chat, even though you may want to train some type of AI to know everything about your company, but it might learn some of its secrets as well, and you don't want that leaking. So there will be likely a private versus public version of that AI agent. In the longer term, or maybe it's already happening, a lot of VC money is already flowing into AI companies, but overall there's deflationary pressure. Deflationary pressure here is emphasized by the creation of software going to zero. So basically people that have jobs may have, and I have a whole section talking about this, kind of the impacts of AI philosophically to kind of a post AI takeover economics and what that looks like. But effectively, you may have the dollar switch in a little bit of a sense, right? So inflationary means that you can, the money goes a lot further, right? The money goes less far by increase in prices, but deflationary means that, all of these different AI SaaS companies that come up with $5 a month subscriptions may not be used, because you may just pay a $20 a month subscription and be able to get a combination of features, right? So a lot of AI SaaS companies that started before GPT Store was announced can now see that they may have been taken over by the bigger company, kind of similar to Facebook being one of the larger social networks. And then when smaller social networks come into play, kind of Facebook just kind of steals their features and leverages their network effects that they already have. And I think in the future, we have personal AI clones as well as company AI clones that are being created, AI employees that are just Slack bots. So me as a Clembot, right, I've created my own series of Clembots that I've used for doing a lot of things, for automating a lot of my own tasks. And you can imagine in the future, I can allow people to talk with my Clembot and charge them for it. So this whole GPT store is creating your own GPT, but hopefully monetizing that for yourself as well. And maybe interactions between GPTs and AI bots will happen without us, right? Just between handshakes between different GPTs in a simulation. And so the simplest way to cover this is use cases being the Uber for X, meaning if you have a gig economy, right, creation of leveraging the software for your location, for different payment mechanisms, for connecting a supply and demand, for kind of the buy side, the sell side, right? Doing all of this work creates gig economies for people to increase the value of that particular piece of software. So you can have Uber for driving from one place to the other, but also for taking groceries from one place to the other. ChatGPT for X is not necessarily just a bunch of chatbots everywhere, but I think it's the training of those AI assistants on the data and being able to share those interfaces in a new way. So there will be different chatbots that are specialized for different purposes and different ways of training them. I think what's interesting about image creation and also general prompting versus querying, when you use Google, you are querying, right? You are trying to, for example, find the best query that gives you the best result. And when you're doing image generation on Midjourney, for example, you are constantly typing in new different types of combinations of queries in order to hone in on the picture that you would like to see. And so your feedback loop here is to create your 4 options, variations, and edits to those options. It might be different areas, but then you finalize your image and you save your image. I think the advantage and some things that have been happening with the abilities of ChatGPT, where you have the ability to analyze the image as well as generate the image within the same context, means that your prompts are more about conversations. And so there's a trend right now called even more. So if you look at something that's even more spicy, it'll start off with like a bunch of peppers, and then if you say even more spicy, it'll keep on adding to it, and it'll make it like nuclear spicy with bombs and dragons and everything. And anyway, the idea is that you're prompting the LLM to make suggestions and then to refine the actual query that's being entered into your DALL-E 3 or other image generation. And in the past, what I would do is I would start with ChatGPT to create some recommendations on different queries to put into Midjourney and then refine them within ChatGPT. But now you can do that all within one interface. And therefore, the LLM kind of helps you along the way, very similar to how Google, you have this SGE that has a conversation mode for that. And so when you have all of these different features come together, what do people usually talk about from the marketing side? They all want a trained ChatGPT on their own data. And with the AI agent, the GPTs that were announced with GPT Store, this is now possible. But effectively, you have some people that want to deploy it to the public, meaning easier ways for customer support, for creating docs, for writing code, for deploying their own plugins, doing some type of custom queries, or they want to deploy it internally so that the private data resources can be specialized, so that your team can level up and can train, so that your co-pilot can help you with different product management and project management and help you iterate on your product properly. And because this is about Web3 and we are consensus, this is what I've seen as major AI and Web3 augmentation approaches. So starting off with an onboarding guide for your chat docs, so chatting with your docs, very simply. Then you have an education AI tutor, which we've seen quite a few of as well. Polygon has one where it's a coding assistant, and you have to pay credits, and the identity is connected to your Polygon wallet as well. There's also APIs that could be exposed in different ways. There's customizations that can happen with GPTs. And there's also the thought of GPT SEO. So what is search engine optimization, where there's no advertising and everything's a subscription model? I predict that in the future, you probably have GPTs that are trained with the AI recommendations built into that particular GPT. So you might actually get paid to build a GPT that's a little bit biased towards your products. In terms of internal usage for DAO onboarding, I think there's different training bots on Discord that are getting more and more creative and can be deployed and can help with that type of introduction and kind of warm welcome that you're used to. And then there's also the content creation velocity. So I think all of these things are happening quite quickly and pivoting, especially because of the GPT store that was announced. And so when we take a step back, what do we have on the left here? We have independently trained, configured large language models. So there's hundreds of them now that are trained in different ways. You know, Meta's AI is Llama. I don't know why I still have the Meta AI logo here, but that's Llama, and Palm 2 is going to become Gemini, and there's all these, like DeepMind is releasing a lot of things, but effectively, and there's Grok now with X, but effectively you have trained public data up to a certain date, and that's kind of frozen in time. What you can advance that with is live public data, meaning like Grok, it's supposed to learn the latest trends and be able to answer questions about your own profile and things like that. Then you have trained private data, meaning I have a bunch of Jira documentation and Confluence web pages and Notion pages I'd like it to learn. And then there's also live Slack messages that are happening and conversations from meetings that I want to summarize and I want my LLM to learn. And eventually you'll think of different vendors you may want to expand the capabilities. What if we can have a conversation or have some type of talk? That talk leads to a summary. That summary leads to a bot that generates a bunch of Jira tickets and then sets the dates and then assigns people to them. So all of these are authentication through your, Okta or some other type of APIs, and then you would be able to access all of your internal, IT systems. And what you wind up getting is a personalized AI coordinating agent that can access all your personal web apps. And with that, that means that your corporation may have different AI agents that are helping all of your employees, but then also interact with other agents' employees. So if any type of DAO to DAO interaction, right, partnership management, maybe it's different AIs reaching out to each other, which could be super fascinating. So I was going to do a step back into what has happened in the past year from November 2022 to November 2023, because OpenAI has been really influential for getting the word out there of using this chat interface for solving, the Turing problem and having a lot of NP complete problems be completed. It's actually quite scary, but these are the features that were launched, and just as a general software company, it's pretty impressive, right? Starting off with ChatGPT Plus with the $20 per month subscription, so you get more access. There's API playgrounds, GPT-4 as an advancement of a better large language model, reaching 100 million users quite quickly, faster than any of the other types of social media platforms that we have in terms of acceleration, basically killing off all of the other types of projects that might leverage, studying for students. I believe Chubb was one of them. And anyway, I think it's really interesting how it's being implemented and practiced with, because use cases kind of touch every part of your daily productivity. The mobile apps launched, they launched plugins. People started building a bunch of plugins that I thought were quite interesting, that did not have the best search mechanism, but I thought the plugins were really impactful. Then there was Code Interpreter, which means that ChatGPT could write its own code in Python, execute it directly, try multiple times, and come up with some solution so that you can download, any type of file conversion, so you can do videos, so you can change your images into videos, all of these things. Then ChatGPT Enterprise came out in kind of conjunction with OpenAI. And I think that ChatGPT Enterprise was kind of the private version of all of these features that stays up to date with those public features. They reintroduced internet access through Bing, so it can now, seeing live data is not necessarily a stream of all of the internet. It's just reading a page and keeping that in your context of the LLM. GPT-4 Vision came out. So last month, I went into all these GPT-4 Vision examples of how interesting and powerful it could be. Last month, they talked about, I think it's going to be a live transcribing. People would type in HBO to kind of keep up with newscasters. And now I think it's going to become live commentary, meaning instead of hiring, the best commentators, you can have live commentary on specific games that you're playing, specific types of sports, if they're kind of less popular. Everything can have a commentary because you can take screenshots and views and then stream it to ChatGPT for it to give a voice overview. Whisper is still open source. They're able to launch that locally, so transcribe all of your videos live. Everything's pretty much built in. You have GPT Builder, which is an easy way to build a custom GPT with combined capabilities. There was also the launch of GPT-4 Turbo and all this cheaper access to existing type of systems. And GPT Store will be launched next year instead. And I think what we're looking forward to, or at least what I'm kind of thinking will happen, is something called a multi-agent swarm. So I discussed maybe 2 months ago a session around Auto GPT and Auto Gen, as well as Chat Dev. And all of these are open source projects that allow for conversations between AI agents and different roles that they can play so that it can form a company. And that company operates within a simulation, and that company has the goal of building some video game, and it can do it quite quickly, like within a few hours, and probably with less than $1 worth of spend. And it will create a game for you. And it has all the documentation of the process for creating that game, which means we're living in a simulation. But anyway, there's also cross-thread memory. So imagine being able to talk to your GPT and say, hey, remember, my name is Clemens. So Humane AI came out with its AI pin. And all of these things are pretty much a customization of learning all of your kind of smaller data. And I think that it's only a matter of time that OpenAI creates kind of separate, OpenAI creates kind of separate profiles for yourself and be able to have that memory about who you are, and then more agent to agent conversations. So before there was the launch of Dev Day last month for OpenAI, I used to use all of these other GPTs and LLMs, and now I just use ChatGPT because it has really taken over quite a bit. And I wanted to cover what it actually has taken over. So in terms of solutions, if you're a developer and you wanted to customize your own large language model to be your AI, right? The AI that represents your company or represents you, the first thing to do is, under cost implementation, is to just tell it custom instructions, tell it to be a particular persona, tell it to embody some type of learnings, right? And to give it more context about your problem, and then it will basically learn from its existing static public data and give you the best recommendations. And so that works pretty well for most things. The next level up is called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG, and that's where you feed it some knowledge sources, so documents or connected to a database, and it has to process and create embedding so that you can then get some type of vector mapping to all of this data. And so that is also quite simple to do. There's a lot of bots that are out there. LivePeer has these chatbots that you can customize. I've shared before in previous settings this bot maker that I've used. It's called BotPress, and with your BotPress account, you can create your own bots that learns from a set of data. Continue with Google. I could share this with everyone a little bit later. Oh, I logged into the wrong one. But just to show my point, there is a way before creating GPTs that you can create. This is by Clembot, which I have launched on my CLemon site. Right, it's basically an easy way for you to low code, no code, create different prompts and then create a very simple logic, and you can query, say hi, and it can represent a knowledge center. So I have like a quick start knowledge center of my website, my book itself, and it'll follow your courses. So feel free to experiment with it. But you can also build GPTs if you already have that. And then after you have RAG, so RAG is, imagine, short-term memory, and then longer-term memory, you want to practice off of specific formats. So if you wanted to give it invoices so it can learn a common invoice thing, then you would do fine-tuning. And so the reason why you fine-tune your model, so GPT 3.5 fine-tuning is available, right? Turbo, all of these are to optimize your cost to run. So it would cost a lot less to run over time, and it would be a lot faster. And so fine-tuning your foundational model is usually what enterprises do. And from there, if you wanted to train your own model from scratch, right? If you wanted to create your own version of GPT-4 and name it something else or use an open source version, what people have been trying to do was to reduce the size of your GPT by training it on existing models that already understand the language. And what you do is you ask it questions and ask for the reason behind its answers, and it will reduce the number of parameters it requires to create the training. And so a lot of academics, a lot of larger companies are investing their funds into training their own models that are specialized, but most people can just start from a GPT-4 3.5, fine-tune it, and get pretty good results. I think what's been missing and what people have been thinking about is, how do I test the model? Like, how do I know this model is good and won't be leaking information and, is training and doing and responding to the way that I would like it to respond? And the answer is you probably can't, right? It's hard to QA a large language model because unless you have another large language model, red team it and try to break it, it's pretty hard to do. Okay, so what that means is everything that I mentioned with Web3 companies using AI has now been replaced with GPTs and hosted AI agents. And therefore, there's no more GPT plugins, even though I did like a lot of them. And now there's a GPT store. And just to make a comparison, imagine in the early days of blogging, you can host your own WordPress site. There's a blogging operating system of some sort. There was a plugin marketplace of some sort, a way to embed advertising, to create SEO properly so that it can be discovered. All of that was kind of your own GPT, right? The GPT that you used an OpenAI API key to build, but then you host it on your own site. What we have today is a lot of people using Substack or Medium or blogging platforms. And what blogging platforms allow you to do is it builds out payments and subscriptions. So you have kind of a user base that has the same identity. It helps with auto hosting and auto scaling. So you don't have to deal with your DNS provider or kind of your own series of servers for adjusting, like DigitalOcean or something like that for making sure that you can scale your database. And so all of these, it also has features for migrating your old blog to the new blog with all of its contents, right? You can also have paid users with a direct to reader. For the Web3 space, this would be Mirror, being able to do all of your Web3 things like fundraising and token launching within that space. So all of that and all of those similar features can be imagined in a GPT type of platform. So again, the comparison is owning your own GPT, hosting it, servicing it, keeping it up to date, training it, versus having a GPT store platform where you can build it there like Squarespace and be able to host it there and auto scale. So and this is all, I announced this last month, but the thought of this is still yet to be built, which is you have now all of these company-specific GPT agents that are trained on your own data. You have GPT builder or consultants helping you build your GPTs. You have a GPT store or directory or distribution channel where you can discover, pay for, deploy, auto scale, which should be decentralized. We have the Snap store. We kind of want the snaps to be decentralized. We want to audit it. But what's been missing is a GPT naming service, so a way for you to resolve your particular GPT, as well as a new GPT interface. And maybe it's all HD based, similar to how Web3 works, but maybe it's not. Like maybe it's a new operating system altogether that optimizes on conversations to optimize us on that space. So really looking forward to these two innovations above it, because it is a new user experience for connecting to that data. And so the next OpenAI feature, and I kind of mentioned this before, AutoGen is a project that was published by Microsoft, and there's a whole GitHub around it. You can experiment with it. I already mentioned this in the last time, but effectively, you can open up Jupyter Docs and be able to experiment with all of these different pieces. So what this is leading towards is AutoGen, which is AI swarms, which is kind of AI to AI communication, meaning you can create your own GPT CEO, product, GPT engineer, different advisors, and the store itself will help you with pricing. So maybe I'm renting a consultant from one area to another area and being able to leverage that as well, just to kind of get the best of multiple teams across multiple consultants. And so the future that I've been thinking about and talking about and trying to land as buzzwords is software on demand. So imagine if you needed a piece of software, and what's kind of missing is kind of the customer support, but you can build out a lot of pieces of software using all of these different GPTs and all of these GPT services. You can also have software as a service. So building SaaS companies can become its own service. These AI agents will likely come up with their own API. So APIs are really just request and reply, right? We're just talking between different centralized databases, right? And so if you have AI agents talking with each other, then the language replaces the API in some ways. So I'm calling it a linguistic API. And then I think like AutoGen as a service. So AutoGen, again, being the swarm communication between AI agents, will likely be its own consulting service. So I need to construct the best team as a consulting company to come up with, all of these different consulting players within my team in Deloitte or McKinsey, and then I deploy that particular team. So you're still organizing all of these things together. The last thought I have here is around post-labor economics. So what happens when your knowledge work is completely automated? This is from HBO, the latest South Park on the Panderverse. And it's funny, I'm not going to ruin it, but effectively, one of the things that's discussed is how basically how people who are in knowledge work that are white collar are basically in need for more blue collar work. So this is the shift between and flip between white collar and blue collar. Most white collar work is revolved around technology in some way, shape, or form. And so if all of AI replaces, white collar work, then what's left is doing things in person. You can create robots, but before you do that, it's probably easier to create bounties for people to drive cars than it is to create full self-driving. And so the benefits of AI automation here, what happens when you no longer need human labor, then what happens then? But a kind of in the interim, what happens when your tech lowers costs and there's fewer jobs in tech, or the tech jobs that manage AI are much more expensive? And how does that all come together? And I think these are all good thought exercises, but may become true in the next 50 years, maybe for our next generation. But effectively, there's thoughts around automation benefits with productivity, with scientific acceleration. So definitely benefits in the medical field, definitely benefits in protein folding, simulating all of these. I believe DeepMind just released something that was quite fascinating. It was able to do millions of reviews of protein structures, and humanity was only able to do like 5% of it so far, and it was able to basically cover everything within an hour of operating on it. So what builds forward is the impact on education, I think is significant as well. So if I have, my daughter with an iPad that's just starting to learn to read, there could be a AI agent that's a mentor that is assisting her throughout her lifetime that helps with different types of learning paths. So if she has difficulty reading or difficulty doing things, there may be kind of a Siri that kind of hovers and talks to your child and helps them in development all throughout college, all throughout specialization. There's also the thought of what if, that particular AI agent and AI tutor then becomes the thing that makes your daughter money, or that could be a new education, but also path of what does a person do? What does a person do when also the economics changes, right? There could be short-term impacts with regulatory oversight. So everybody's wondering if we've reached AGI. I have a slide on this as well, or ASI. And basically what it could lead to is price collapse. It could lead to raw material savings, weird economies of scale, different labor cost removal, and the impacts of that. So probably not happening in the next few years, but maybe in the next few decades, and it's something to consider. Okay, the different insights that I've covered, this is the AI training news that you kind of do clickbaits for in the past 6 months or so, and I've just highlighted the ones that I thought were relevant for this month. The big one was with OpenAI firing Sam Altman, and then Sam Altman joining Microsoft, and then Sam Altman returning into OpenAI, and then all of this other drama. So the conclusion to this, I guess the latest conspiracy theories is that Sam Altman returned because the whole company was going to lead, like 95% of the company signed this this letter saying that if he doesn't come back, we're all leaving and going to Microsoft, and basically Microsoft would win because they would just acquire this whole company altogether. But obviously they didn't want to do that because that would be kind of removing one of their external, just pretty much adding a lot of extra debt onto Microsoft's balance sheet all at once. But it's also not great because yeah, you kind of want a separate company instead of absorbing it into one big company. But the other thing that people thought about was this announcement of Q Star. And so, still, again, all speculation, but I did some research on what Q Star is. And the thought is that, the board was given a presentation by the CTO and by Ilya about Q Star and how it could lead to some detrimental effects, and Sam wanted to open it up and add it to ChatGPT, and they didn't want to do that because it could lead to, again, pretty bad things. But the Q Star itself is a combination of Q learning and A Star. And I heard a podcast, the way they explained it is, imagine you're playing a video game and that video game had a guide, and the guide continued to update. And let's say it was a maze, like what was available, like let's say you had to make left and right turns, it would run simulations on the guide and remember the turns that you've taken and the mistakes that you've made, and then give you hints as you're playing the new round on what that looks like. And so there's this whole series of mappings and arrays and directions that you would go, but the Q learning and the Q mapping guide is basically using reinforcement learning to improve your view of the world, of the simulation, and then make the next steps afterwards. And that's kind of like the simplified way to talk about it. And A-star search altogether was an easier way to translate all of this information into something relevant for LLMs. And so the thing that was revealed was that there was a model that was able to effectively do simple math, and do simple math without the use of any type of existing math teachings. So or kind of the advanced models that we've already built that was outside of a large language model. And so the risk here, and it's an existential risk, is that as it advances very quickly, it could break cryptography. And for those who don't know, everything on the internet in terms of security and your bank accounts and everything is based on cryptography. So just simply passwords, that's all cryptography based. You save your SHA-256 hash of your password into a database, and then you compare the hash. But even beyond that, all of cryptocurrency is cryptography based. So if you can guess somebody's private key from their public key, then you basically break all of cryptocurrency. So it could be a big risk, and that's why it's a risk of breaking a lot of things. And we worried about this with quantum computing, but we didn't think that AI and large language models could do what quantum computers do without the quantum computing, ability to do that number of transactions or number of computes. So that's all super risky. Some people are very scared of it. I'm personally kind of scared of it. It could break the internet, but other things could break the internet too. So anyway, that's kind of the summary of OpenAI's QStar and all those things. A little bit of news, and I haven't updated it from today, but effectively all of these existing players are updating their context windows, updating their features to keep up with OpenAI's ChatGPT-4, GPT-4, and so Claude 2.1 has been released, which has a 200,000 context window with decreased hallucinations and all this other tool use. I think that's super fascinating. Grok has been released to Premium Plus subscribers. Most of them look pretty, pretty weird. It's just Grok has been very, and even Elon has talked about it, saying how it's very cheeky, but it's very sarcastic all the time and makes fun of the user all the time. But the added benefit here is that it does personalized types of recommendations. So it can look at the statistics of how your particular tweets have done and who has tweeted it, and it'll give you additional information on how to improve your X account, for example, or what should I write about today based on what's trending on the news, like these different questions that are really abstract kind of for regular LLM, right? You would have to have live data model for trending news, and you would have to keep on updating it. There's also improvements in 11 labs. So those who use speech, text to speech, or kind of copy different people's voices, now there's speech to speech. You can take your own voice and what is being said and overlay it with somebody else's voice, make it deeper, make it more interesting, make it into multiple languages if you want to. But this is only for, audio to audio, right? That there are other applications that have done audio to video, like HeyGen, and those are pretty interesting as well. I think that's going to be a very popular space for multilingual content, but also, all of internet content will be AI affected in some ways. So who knows? A big update from Amazon during their latest conference. They announced Q, and Q is directly embedded into AWS. It is trained on 17 years of AWS knowledge. Not sure if that's true, but that's what they say, that it's kind of all of the data that they can feed into it that's customized. It is $20 per user per year for the public preview. And internally, we've had some testing around it. And the cool thing is it wasn't just, a general LLM that you can chat with. It was really integrated with a marketplace of different types of data sources. So you can connect it to pretty much every data source that you have, and I'll read that data. And it also includes, a lot of additional features that helps with AWS productivity. So it could impact sales, it could impact a few other things, but I think it is pretty interesting for those who have an AWS account. You can check it out. It's called Q, and it will be likely added to Amazon Connect and Code Whisperer and other types of, engagement inside of the Amazon AWS ecosystem. The last thing I want to bring up is something called the self-operating computer. There's a GitHub page on this, and it was released a few days ago, a week ago, with updates, 2 weeks ago, maybe. Super interesting. Effectively, what it does is it installs the ability for your GPT to take over the interfaces of you, which is your keyboard and mouse. And with that interface that it takes over, it can take screenshots and view what's happening and then directly do what you would do. So imagine you don't need to do any API connectivity because it uses vision to analyze your dashboard page. It can do things like Excel routines. So if you ever created any type of Excel formulas, and even within there, you can write out different tasks within Excel to do and execute those productivity tasks. It would be able to do that. It can also be just a bot that's running on a virtual machine that's clicking on buttons, and that's all pretty scary. But effectively, I like Nicholas here saying that, hey, there's touch screens, hand detection, and now AI answers with text and images, but we have AI promoted as a mouse user, and then the future is back to text-only terminals. So really the interesting thing here is basically this GitHub is showing off how you can use GPT-4V, which is the visual, to take screenshots of what it's doing and complete tasks like Google something, copy and paste it into a Google Sheet. So instead of thinking about it from a system perspective where you would just write APIs and connect them all together, it can also be from a vision perspective where it just does what you're doing by moving the mouse around and clicking things. Okay, two more sections, and I can run through these. These are much more manifestations of all of these agents leading to changes in your organization. And so what do I mean by that? The first is kind of text to something. So text to content, text to image, text to video. This has all been built, right? This has all been explored as extensions to Canva, for example, has the Magic Studio. You can kind of do all of these things within Canva as well. But what you have in terms of content, LiveWand, WordPress editing, creation of slides, creation of articles, optimizing SEO, face swapping, doing all these in and out painting features, all of these can be applied to your everyday job, right? You don't have to be in marketing. You can be doing a lot of things. You can be writing updates to your team, and they all have their place. So the 10-80-10 rule is to leverage your AI agents or leverage the tools that you have to do a majority of the work in terms of creating drafts. And so you can start strong with yourself in the 10%, coming up with ideas, coming up with initiatives. You feed as much of that data as possible into the tools that you use. And again, this is not necessarily with AI. It could be working with your team members. If you are the team lead and you're responsible for the output and deliverable, then you can use the rest of your team to do a lot of this work. And then you can come back and fine tune most of that afterwards. And so here it's just replacing your team with a bunch of AI agents. And then before you submit anything, before you tell people about what you've built, you add in your finesse and you complete the entire process. And so the reason why I bring this up is there was an article about this was a comparison between how this is working with trains. So if you think about the train stops that were created and the train stations leading to all of the creation of these little towns around those train stations, I think there's a similar thing organically happening with AI. So all these AI tools are really creating new routes. And through those routes, you're really building out new types of businesses around them. And so traditional businesses have sales, marketing, product, tech, development, internal systems, finance, HR. DAO-driven projects are similar, but they don't really have as many internal systems. Those are kind of built within the DAO when you formulate it. And then I think AI-based systems themselves will get rid of and automate a lot of these other activities as well. So examples that I've done in the past, and this is an old slide, but I've made a faceless YouTube channel. I've made multilingual audio and video, and you can check out previous recordings for that. In this article, the example process here is for product feature releases. And so I like the comparison. The original process was 1 to 2 weeks for releasing a new version of a user experience, of a new UX. And so it started off with receiving a new screen, right? Testing it with different testers, getting test feedback, building team reviews the screens individually. There's a 1-hour meeting to discuss the changes. Maybe it's a new link update. Maybe it's a Jira ticket that tells people to update the landing page of some sort. Then the compiled changes are put together by a project lead. And then maybe there's a approval meeting, and then the screens have to be changed. And so this is a part of, maturity level of your company creating these processes, but it also leads to a lot of overhead. And so the article itself described the new process, which is only 1 day long instead of 1 to 2 weeks long, where it tells the AI to act as different users to give feedback. So instead of directly reaching out and interviewing people, they're interviewing AI agents that are pretending to be these types of personas and asking them to click through the screens and give feedback. And so AI can compile those changes based on the screens and different feedback that it's received. It can create multiple prototypes. So it can take that feedback and come up with multiple screens to suggest. And then it can also have the team members come together and review all of those changes. And the final code can also be assisted by AI for those modifications and make it more efficient. So all of these things, increases the velocity of your product releases and also reduces the overhead that comes with just working at a company. And I tried to represent this in one slide. And so the one slide is how do employees add value? And so on the left here is individual contributors. If you're an individual contributor, you're doing development work, design work, you're a product engineer, kind of thinking about future roadmap, and maybe you're a part of QA team or support. And so the things that you do involve writing Jira tickets, involves doing competitor analysis, doing research, doing marketing, building marketing content, writing different types of tutorials, completing those designs, solving for customer problems. If you're a consultant, kind of helping out with building out the enterprise versions of your product, writing test cases, documenting your code. That's a huge one. And so individual contributors also attend meetings that are built by management. And so in the management side, to organize and to make sure things get done, they would create these daily sprints. They would summarize your work weekly or on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis. You would also read a lot of what other people are doing. So really good members aren't just stuck inside of their team. They read about what other teams do. They read about the organization and the full OKRs of that organization. They span the ecosystem for new changes, new inspirations for their roadmaps. And so all of these things in purple or pink, right? This is all things that are happening for every team member inside of a company that cares about the space that they work in. There's also presentations on those deliverables. There might be virtual coffee chats and conferences that you attend. And on the management side, there's a lot of writing. There's a lot of motivation. There's a lot of problem solving. There's a lot of shielding for your team, and a lot of it's bureaucracy, but I think that it's useful, right? In some ways, it's onboarding of the team, it's growing the team, it's hiring, it's motivation. And I think that all of these things are they still have their place, but there could be optimizations across all of these areas. And so when you focus on the things that cost the most time for everyone, it's really thinking an internal model of who's working on what and how can I talk about that. So how do I summarize my entire company's operational flow so that I know exactly what the ecosystem is doing and how our product can be improved for that? And then as an individual contributor, you're thinking about how can I add value to all of these things that are happening publicly? And then in management sense, how can I reach consensus across all of the executive members to also see value in that space? And so the purpose of this exercise to think through is how do you build a product, or how do you leverage AI properly to help with kind of this core problem, which is how do I stay updated and feel confident that I know what's happening in the ecosystem? Two other slides here that I think are related to the changes that are being made in terms of search and in terms of LLMs. The first is around the search tactics that we have today. And we all do this, right? We start with a Google search. We maybe use an index of all the news that's occurring. And then you want to get to your trusted sources. And those trusted sources hopefully have done some type of additional research on top of what you've been doing. So maybe it's not just clicking the first link that you get from Google, but maybe it's using different search engines, using different search terms. Maybe it's going on YouTube and looking at different types of tutorials that have been created, or Stack Overflow, or searching Reddit, or using different platforms that are curating the data, or going to different crowdsourcing tutorials. So all these things can still occur. On the rightmost side, you have Discord, discourse forums, Google Scholar. These are the places where you would ask the creators, ask your actual developers, and talk to them to get the source of the data. And I think that this is still the process that we go through, right? There's simple searches, news searches, leading kind of this rabbit hole to Wikipedia or somewhere else. And I think that the difference that's happening with large language models is, again, it's a search, but it's an iteration, and there's really no one size fits all. I think people will still do this. They will still think about well, what if I ask a different large language model? What will I get out of that? If I have different large language models inside of my product themselves, like Notion has Notion AI, which is a combination of GPT-4 and I believe Claude 2. You have FigJam, which now has AI. You have Canva that now has AI. So maybe it keeps you inside of your workflow, inside of that same tool. But at the end of the day, you want to customize. You want to think about your best topic for brainstorming, your SEO optimization, your hero image generation. This is still orchestration of the different solutions that you're building out. I do have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so I'm just going to run through this. I don't have time to go through all of it. So this is a link to my latest ideas for GPTs that I've built and started building out. There's a lot of videos out there to think about what your GPT could be and how to build one. On the most simple sense, you do need a ChatGPT Plus in order to subscription in order to do this. But my thoughts around this were, how do I create a suite of GPTs that help me with a single goal? So internally, maybe I want a digital legacy estate planning GPT that looks at my retirement account, that looks at my beneficiary GPT for will interpreting. Maybe there's a safety GPT for my crypto. There could be ghostwriters to help me out. There could be ecosystem spanning and SWOT analysis that it does. For public facing, maybe there is a particular brand or dev advocate or generating memes or, foodies that are writing articles for Google guides or things like that. Feel free to look through any of the, GPT that are out there. And I think this is like a standard process anyway. The last 2 minutes, I just want to share, and I kind of did this in terms of without kind of sharing the slides for it before. But when people are developing their own trained enterprise models, they always kind of follow different paths of exploration, and they all want to get to the point of the same thing, which is I want an intelligent model that's able to represent my company well and that can actually build out further, and I can own all the data associated to it. And so this was from a survey of techniques by, it was on Dev Day, and there were really good presentations on this, but I highly recommend looking through it. For prompt engineering is the very first step, which is you are priming, adding style and tone instructions, you're handling errors, you're creating some dynamic content, and then you're outputting that format. And there's an example of this, but when you add RAG, what you're doing is you're saying, use this to help if relevant and add on the knowledge. So if the question is, how do I implement the Gas API? Then you would add in your MetaMask SDK and Gas API docs, so your database of material. And what it looks like is, as your chat is completed, the documents, that content preparation is embedding the vectors of those documents into your knowledge base. And then when you retrieve that information, you are inquiring, embedding, and searching that information to get the right output. And the reason why I want to share this slide is the advanced version of this can only get better and better by actually having self-reflection back to your large language model. And so what I mean by that is your chat completion will have a knowledge base, but when you do your retrieval, you can say, my inquiry for the documents, summarize that first, and then embed it, then search, then filter about the results that are most applicable. And then after you're done with requesting the prompt, you can also ask, is this good enough? If not, rewrite it. And so I think when you think through the processes of how this works, and it kind of gets deeper and deeper into seeing how different types of academics have been looking at about improving their implementations. So kind of last minute here, prompt engineering, both of these can be used at the same time. You evaluate and identify the gaps of your knowledge, and then you use RAG or fine tuning. And what you wind up having is that fine tuning has 80% cost savings, and it's usually 3 times faster, which is why you do it. And so the last slide here is just to emphasize, you get better outputs, right? Your prompt engineering, RAG, fine tuning allows you to build out better outputs. Okay, sorry again for speeding through a lot of this. As usual, I tend to create more content than I can present, but looking forward to the new year and I will be taking a break, but mostly to build more GPTs and build more AI things. So thank you so much for the session. Happy holidays, and I'll do another one in January. So thank you, everyone. I do have to drop off for another call, but happy holidays. We'll share the recording to the YouTube playlist as before. And feel free to message me if you have any questions. Take care.